the beginning of a tour through a set of thinning projects. Through the life of our farm, we're lucky enough to engage with NRCS on a number of projects. We were lucky to start really early with some young stand thinning and some brush control projects, things that we couldn't have tackled alone without their help. At this first phase, we're in about a 30-year-old stand where, as you can see behind us, we've already come in and thinned this stand, and it's responded really well. We actually have a bit of understory developed, and it's in great shape. But this same age stand, in a really inaccessible spot, it was just too complicated to access. And we'll get to compare today how this stand looks to what we're about to try and tackle on this really steep ground. Take this opportunity to introduce a good friend, Tom Nygren, who's been a kind of colleague in the small woodlands community up here and consulted with us before, who's our consulting professional forester on this thinning project. And Brad Withrow Robinson with OSU Forestry and Natural Resources Extension.
Thank you, Barrett, and I'm happy to be here on this virtual tour. And I was invited here to talk with you guys, or to talk with folks about this thinning project and some of the cool things that came from that. This was, as you described, a very varied stand when it was planted with a lot of different densities here. And that was going to be a problem, especially given some of the different objectives you talked about for your family to have a diverse stand. And having too many trees, having too densely planted a stand really gets in the way of obtaining some of those aesthetic and habitat objectives that people want. And so 7 years ago, you guys were able to come in here and thin this stand, allowing most of the trees enough room to grow and build up some crown again. So if we look at this stand, this is back on track for the things that you've talked about wanting to see in the future of this stand. When we go across the road and see what the rest of the stand looked like that you weren't able to get to and that you're hoping to treat again, that's going to be a lot more challenging. One of the big problems of doing any of these young stand thinnings, or also called pre-commercial, means that they cost money. They're not making any, they're not paying for themselves. And so that means for a lot of forest landowners, they're in this dilemma. They want to see the stand move in the direction they want, to have that greater diversity and structural and species diversity, and yet it costs. And the longer you wait, the more it costs.
Barrett has been a very good manager in that he's looking for these opportunities to use those resources. And he has taken advantage of NRCS's programs several times in the past. Small woodland owners that have forests need to be timely in taking those actions, and they can get the resources to help them do that, to do thinning early and to get the proper spacing on it so the trees have the space to grow.
Yeah, I mean, you just about hit my mantra, which is thin early and thin often. Early stand thinning and repeated thinning is just such an essential part of small family forest landowners getting many of the amenities that they want from forest ownership. Take a look at this stand. You can just see how it's opened up. We're starting to get a little stuff growing in the understory. Keep this in mind as we go down below at the other part of the stand, and we're going to meet up with Jessica from NRCS, and we'll talk about what the next stand is, but how in just a few years, how these two pieces have diverged. We've moved across the road and down into the other part of the stand that was not treated 7 years ago. And boy, what a contrast this is, huh? Whereas up there, that thinning had let trees stay alive and grow. As we look around down here, we see something totally different. First thing we notice is we're on a slope, which is part of why it wasn't treated last time. This is steep ground, and so it's going to take a different approach. But the consequence of not being treated that first time is that we have way too many trees. All of them are small, hardly growing, and stressed. If you look around, a lot of these small Douglas fir trees are dead. this isn't giving a lot of the things that Barrett and family are interested in. It's dark, there's some diversity in the hardwoods, but the understory is almost bare.
Well, when we have a situation like this, we have to consider two things. One is it important to do this because it is going to be costly? And how much thinning to do, and how many trees do we want to have here? What's our desired future condition for this stand? To get to that point, it's going to, on this particular stand, it's going to take a lot of extra effort to get there. And that's why we call in the cavalry. We've got helpers and partners such as the Natural Resource Conservation Service, which has a program that will help landowners do that kind of heavy work where they only have to pay part of the cost. And so I'd like to introduce Jessica Wells, who's the district conservationist for Washington County Natural Resource Conservation Service, and she's going to talk about their programs that will help these landowners.
Yeah, so thankfully there's people like Tom out there that are working with these local landowners and letting them know that not only do we exist, but we're here to help them. So on this project, I got a phone call from Mr. Brown, who was told about us from Tom, that said, I have a project where I need to do some thinning. It's a pretty diverse site. My weeds are under control. Can you come help? So at that point, we set up a site visit to come out and look at the project and to meet with Tom and with Barrett, and to look at what state is it in, what practices do we have that can help. And with that, we have pre-commercial thinning is one of the practices that we can help with. As well as then what do we do with the logs once they're done. So on this particular site, due to the slope, the discussion was let's do pre-commercial thinning and lop and lay scatter.
You're not doing this for fun. I mean, this is going to be a messy, hard job. You're doing this because you're just barely within time that you can bring this stand by doing a very purposeful, thoughtful treatment. You can bring it back in line with what the family's objectives for the property are.
This is a steep site, so it could lead to a lot of erosion and other concerns if not done properly. So that's also where us coming in with additional funding can help these landowners to be able to do things the way they want to and have additional funds to help them meet their goals.
We only have so many different tools in our silvicultural and our forest management toolbox, and thinning is the most important one. And yeah, it's used in timber production, but it's actually probably most important for folks who have multiple objectives. And that's one of the things I really try to get over to people. You're not emulating forest industry by going out and doing a lot of young stand thinning. You're often moving away from that because in doing that thinning, you can be choosing to leave hardwoods or other species. You can be creating variable density, so you have more light here to keep some understory shrubs growing, and a nice timber stand that you manage that way.
Once you meet with the landowner and you get their goals, their objectives, you bring out the forester that's going to be assisting, and also we will come back and meet with the contractor and make sure that we've answered any questions and they know the direction going forward, so that when they're done, they meet our specifications, we can complete our cost share, certify the practice, and reimburse the landowner for the work that's been done on their ground.
Barrett has been really good about bringing in partners to help him with these, and wildlife biologists, for example, who can give him some ideas about what he can do in these other stands, and you have some programs even to help with that.
We do. We've got our conservation stewardship program as another program we have, and we've been out here right now on our environmental quality incentives program, which is EQIP. Our stewardship program these are people that have already addressed most of the resource concerns on their property, and they want to be able to give it that extra boost and enhance it. So through that program, we have different things that we call enhancements that they can put in. So they want to diversify their stand, they want to put in pollinator habitat, that they can further their objectives and goals, and use that program to support that.
And we haven't mentioned it yet, but there's another important objective here, particularly for Barrett, and that's recreation opportunities, because Barrett is really an expert on trails. He has ideas about how this can be better improved for recreation opportunities. And you can do that with some of the cultural opportunities with the vegetation.
So we're here in a 40-year-old stand to continue our thinning discussion. It's obviously beautiful in here now. We started with some very early steps to get it here. So we were in here at about age 12, 13 with a pre-commercial thin, and these were green limbs to the ground and almost like older looking Christmas trees, to give you some idea. And those were pre-commercially thinned and left. And that set us up for the next entry, also a thinning entry, to actually be a productive commercial thin. What we benefit from today of not only being lucky enough to have a really productive site, really high site ground, but from the way we benefit from these strategic thinning operations supported by a really strong management plan right off the bat, is we have options. We have options for doing a lot in the habitat space here. We have obviously recreation values we can generate at a high rate. All the while we've got a really productive investment here on the ground as well.
So this combination of getting in there early kept your options open, didn't force your hand. You did your thinning in a timely manner. And off here to my side, there's this tree that has a beam of light on it. It's a really good example of what you accomplished by doing that. If we look at that tree, we can see that you have kept a really good green crown. It's that amount of green crown that drives the growth of the tree. And that leads to, tree growth, which is timber, but it also leads to tree health. That tree there with that light on it probably has 35, maybe 40% crown, which sets that tree up to never miss a beat when you did the thinning, and also means that this whole stand, which averages something about that, is really stable. Your two-step thinning freed you up and gave you a very vigorous and stable stand, and you can see that by that crown. And so a stand like this is it's like putty in your hands now. You can mold this to go so many more different directions than if you had missed that thinning and you were doing a rescue commercial thinning and you're saying, I only dare do so much or it might fall over. Tom, what comes to your mind?
Well, same thing. You expressed it very well, Brad, and particularly emphasize the fact that you've got the vigorous understory of different types of forbs and small shrubs, which provides habitats for a lot of different creatures. So for a landowner that has multiple objectives, this fits in very well. And something else too, as I look around this stand, I see that, well, it doesn't just keep going. It's adjacent to other stands. You've got a small hardwood stand over there, another hardwood patch over here. So you've got that kind of spatial diversity of different types of species, as well as this structural diversity that these large trees are giving you that you don't have in many other parts of your property.
One thing I want to emphasize, especially to early woodland owners or young families who are just getting started, you can look at this with quite a bit of envy, like somehow this just occurred and you could never get there. But really this is the benefit of just small decisions made early. And so use your imagination about what time and good decision making and a good expert consultation can get you.
This is not a shabby investment. You have high quality timber stand here that is consistent with your other values, even while you recreate it and you do habitat. Tom, I mean, we're growing value here, right?
That's right, and it's low risk value. I mean, it's not like the stock market where it goes way up one day and way down the next day.
This is a 25-year-old stand that in a number of ways, several differences here, different characteristics in this stand. We planted with a pretty thoughtful spacing in 1995 with a really good genetically improved seedling. The NRCS, once again, is able to partner with us on a cost share project for a stand and kind of diversity improvement thinning.
And it's interesting in this stand to see like the diversity of species in here in this stand that have come in as volunteers after the planting. The maple, the nice big red cedar there, and other species. So it's kind of evolved a little bit differently than those denser stands we looked at on the hillside.
You can see this canopy is definitely starting to close over. It's starting to darken in here, which is really going to kind of choke off the complexity and diversity. And we're coming along at a time when we can actually shape this from a diversity, complexity, understory standpoint, and it should respond really well. We should be able to have a good result here.
I think so. Like you both mentioned, the stand is diverse. So as the prescription is being made and as they're coming in to remove trees, they're going to not only look for good, healthy ones, they're going to look for what trees can we leave to keep the diversity that's already here. This
would be a great opportunity for on-the-ground wood. We're going to do a lop and scatter approach. But in a lot of these areas, hopefully every few acres, we're going to have a really substantial habitat piles, engineered structures that will tend to mimic large wood. It's another benefit from a thinning operation like this and this kind of partnership. We can achieve these habitat outcomes and improve the stand at the same time.
Another partnership that we've been able to work with and isn't here today was Department of Forestry. So they have some stewardship foresters that can also come out to sites and help work with the objectives and explaining forest practice rules and setbacks. So that's another great group to get involved with.
True. Our stewardship foresters over the years have had boots on the ground here as much as anybody.